This is the Extreme Stewardship Podcast, where we explore anything and everything that gets us better at making things good and good at making things better. This is a special episode brought to you by the Marketplace Ministry of Sun City Church in Spokane Valley, Washington, because I had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago to speak at an event there with a group of leaders and business owners about the theology of work. The audio didn't quite come together at the very beginning, but the gist of it is this: out of the heart, the mouth speaks. And this is true in terms of how our mouths speak about work, just like it's true in every other arena. So the question is, what ought to be in our hearts about work, such that when our mouths speak, they speak in agreement with what God speaks because our hearts are in alignment with His. And the first step toward getting that heart and mouth alignment is to get the story right. The story of work has four parts: the creation of work, the corruption of work, the redemption of work, and the renewal of work. So I'm going to tell that story and go from there.
The very first thing we learn about God in Scripture, in the beginning, God did a bunch of stuff. And at the end of Genesis chapter 1, it looks back and says, on the seventh day, what did God do? He rested from the work that He'd been doing. The very first thing we learn about God is that He works. And then we get towards the end of Genesis chapter 1, and the pinnacle of God's first work is to make workers. Let us make man in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule. And Genesis 1 doesn't really explain what it means that we were made to rule. So you go to Genesis chapter 2, and it says that God took the man and then the woman, and He put them in the garden to work. You and I were created by God to work. That's why we're here. Now, in the context of the story we find ourselves in now, that doesn't always sound like a good thing. Some of us were told by our parents early and often, you know why I had you? So you get work. And we didn't receive that as a positive thing at the moment. But when God created us, He created us to do a good thing. Now, watch this. Nerd moment here. There's this very old document called the Enuma Elish. The Enuma Elish is the Babylonian version of Genesis 1. So you think the ancient Israelites, they've got their origin story in our Bibles, and then the Babylonians have their version. And in the Babylonian version, it goes something like this. There's a whole bunch of gods, and they're having a fight. And the reason they're having a fight is that the younger gods don't want to do all the manual labor that the older gods are making them do. Like, this is how the world comes into being. There's just work. That's just the way it is. Somebody has to do it, and the new kids on the block have to do it. And they don't want to, so they start a fight. And in the Babylonian version, one of the gods, a guy named Marduk, who turns out to be the chief deity of the Babylonians, of course, he ends up leading a war, winning a war, and at the climax of the thing, he brings everybody back together and he says, look, hey gods, chill, I got this. I got this. He takes some of the blood from one of the gods he killed, and he mixes it with some dirt, and he creates humans. And he turns to all the other gods and he says, I have created man, on whom the toil of the gods may be laid, so that the gods can rest. Wow. So in the Babylonian story, we exist to work because the gods don't want to. Now read Genesis 1. Is that what God did? No. See, the Babylonian version is, I'm going to create workers so I don't have to be one. The biblical version is, I'm going to create workers so they can join me. It's not, hey, humans, go do this stuff I don't want to do. It's, hey, humans, come join me in the stuff that I love. Yeah. It is not, go solve my problem. It is, come share my joy. It's good. Leadership 101, right? You've had that experience at a workplace, haven't you? I'm so glad you're here. I hate this part of the job. Go do it for me. No, that's the Babylonian theology of work. Right? The first part of the story is God says, I love to create. I love to work. I want some partners in this. I don't need them. He can do it just fine without us. He created us to join Him in doing the good work of taking that creation that he put together in the first place and moving it in the direction he intends for it to go. So that's the first part of the story of work. Work is a good thing. Work did not come about as a result of sin. There was work before sin, and we'll get there in a minute. There will be work after sin. Work is not a necessary evil. Work is a necessary good. It's why we're here. That's the first part of the story. That's the creation of work. The second part of the story is the corruption of work. We live that one every day. Genesis 3 happens. Adam and Eve sin. And it's not a mistake. You go back to Genesis 1 and ask, why are we here? To steward God's creation and to have babies so they can steward God's creation. You come to Genesis 3, what's going to go badly now? Hey, Adam, stewarding creation is going to be a real pain. Hey, Eve, having babies so they can steward creation is going to be a real pain. But notice this. God does not say, you know what, I tried it, that didn't work, I give up on that plan, let's do something different. He says, no, you're still going to steward the earth. You're still going to have kids so they can steward the earth. We're still going to stick to the plan. I have not changed my mind about anything. But it's going to be hard now because sin has come into the world. Work doesn't always work. You know how that is? That's the second phase. The third phase. There was this guy named Jesus. All right, now once this happened, this is going to take a minute here. Genesis 1. Let's create humanity in our image, in our likeness, so that they can rule. And then there's this wonderful little commentary of sorts on Genesis 1 in Psalm 8. Psalm 8 says, O Lord, our Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. I cannot believe how magnificent you are. What is humanity? And what are we that you care so much about us? What is man that you are mindful of him, the Son of Man that you care for him? You made him a little lower than the angels. You crowned him with glory and honor and set him over the works of your hands. So Psalm 8 says, yeah, Genesis 1, that whole thing, yeah, that's amazing because we are so small and God is so big and creation is so big, and yet God chose us to rule over it with him. Hebrews chapter 2. But Genesis 1, Psalm 8 looks back at Genesis 1. Hebrews chapter 2 looks back at Psalm 8. And it quotes that portion of Psalm 8 that God created us to rule over the works of his hands. And he put everything under our feet. But then the writer of Hebrews says, yeah, we don't see it, do we? We do not yet see all things subjected to humanity the way they were supposed to. I mean, you look around, right? Everyone in here can think of 100 ways off the top of their head that humanity is not currently ruling over the works of God's hands the way he created us to. So the writer of Hebrews looks at the Old Testament and says, yeah, this is what we were made for. It's not happening, is it? We do not see all things subjected to him, but. Hebrews chapter 2, verse 9 says, but we do see Jesus. We see Jesus, who was made lower than the angels like us as a human being, now crowned with the glory and honor that you and I were supposed to have. This is a little bit weird for us. Jesus was born as a human. That's pretty important. He did a whole bunch of stuff. He healed people. He taught, he gathered his disciples. He mentored them. He did all these things. That was pretty cool. He died on the cross for our sins. Big deal. He rose from the dead. Bigger deal. But there's one more moment in this story that we sometimes overlook. Jesus rises from the dead, hangs out with some people for a little while, and then he does this weird ascend into heaven thing. That I don't know about you, maybe Sun City is a bit of an exception for those of you that come here, but most of the churches I've been around don't tend to talk about the ascension all that much. Because it's weird. Like Jesus is on a mountain and he's resurrected, which means his body does weird stuff now, and then he floats up into a cloud and is gone. I'm like, okay, why was that important? Well, here's why it's important. Hebrews chapter 2 says this, that when Jesus ascended into heaven, he was invited by the Father to sit at his right hand as a human being. Jesus right now is a man. flesh and blood, resurrected flesh and blood, man. And he's sitting at the right hand of his Father, crowned with glory and honor, ruling over the works of God's hands. Which means this. Right now, there is one human being whose work always works. When Jesus ascended to heaven, he took his throne, and as a man, as a human, he is ruling over creation the way that you and I were intended. And he's also the God and creator of all. I'm not skipping that part, just to be clear. But there's a guy, flesh and blood like you and me, and his work always works. And what Hebrews chapter 2 goes on to say is that when Jesus ascended, and he sat at his Father's right hand, and he became the one human whose work is actually working the way everybody's work is supposed to work. He did this so that he might bring many sons and daughters into that glory. So I work, and sometimes it works, and a lot of time it doesn't. And a lot of the work I do that I think is working won't tomorrow. And then someday I'll be dead and gone. No one will remember it anyway. And that's part of what it means to be in that second phase of the story, that work has been corrupted. But we're into this third phase where one human has done the work, and it worked, and his work works, and he is making it so that mine will work and yours will work as well. So that's the phase we're in right now. But there's one more. Because Jesus did not rise from the dead and ascend to heaven so that we could ditch this world we live in and burn it and move on to something else. One day there will be a new creation. And you and I will work. We will rule over the works of God's hands. We will steward creation the way we were always made to do. That's where this story is going. There is an original divine intent that we would rule the world on God's behalf, and we blew it. And they got corrupted. But then Jesus came and began this process of redeeming work so that just like his work currently works, your work and my work will one day work as well. So when we talk about work and the story we're living in, we got to tell the whole thing. It's creation of work. There's corruption of work. There's redemption of work. And then finally, one day there will be a renewal of work. And we got to tell the whole story. Now, I want to take that story a little bit and then shift gears into how do I talk about this? How do I do this in real time? Because I don't just wake up every day walking around telling people creation, corruption, renewal, redemption. That's weird. I want to break this into 3 buckets. The first bucket are things that out of my heart, my mouth needs to speak to me. So here's a very simple morning liturgy. The simplest one, all right? You wake up, and you go into the bathroom, and you look in the mirror. And the very first thing every morning, you look into the mirror, and you say to yourself, you are not God. God created you to work, but he's still God. And particularly for those of us that are in positions of leadership, management, business owners, managers, executives, whatever it might be, we have this tendency to think that if I don't do the work, it ain't gonna get done. And we forget something. We forget we're not God. Teacher of mine used to say this. You should write this down. This is good. He would say, the only difference between God and us is that God never thinks he's us. I like that. The only difference between God and us is that God never thinks he's us. God never has an identity crisis. Crazy, right? God never wakes up in the morning and is like, wait, who's in charge of the universe again? I forgot for a second. I do that all the time. I wake up and I think it's all up to me. How do I forget that the sun rose this morning, whether I wanted it to or not? I'm irrelevant to that. I'm not God. I should open my eyes first thing every morning, look in the mirror and remind myself of that. No matter what work needs to get done today, I am a steward, not an owner, which is why my podcast couldn't be called Extreme Ownership. I am a creature, not the creator. The sun does not rise or set at my command, no matter how important I think I am. That's the first thing that my heart needs to speak to myself every day. The second thing is this. When I start to look at my day and think, all right, what am I going to be doing today? What sort of work am I going to be doing? Now, I want to back up into Genesis 1 a little bit. Because what happens is that God kickstarts a process. Genesis 1 verse 2, the earth is formless and empty or void or whatever your Bible translation says. And then he spends 6 days making something out of it. But it's important, I think, to notice that when we get to the end of the week of creation, however that went down, the work's not done. God did not come to the end of creating. He's like, okay, now nobody touch anything. I got it exactly the way I want it. Please don't mess anything up. He did not say that. What he said was, I have set creation on a trajectory. And I want you, my image bearers, my stewards, my workers, to partner with me in continuing to move it along that trajectory. Now, he decides what the trajectory is. I don't get to decide that. He did, but I get to partner with him in moving it further along. Here's what that means. When I look at Genesis 1 and it says that God worked, and I look at Genesis 2 and it says that he invited Adam and Eve to work, and I think, well, what does work mean? I don't think they had paychecks going on at that point in the story, so it isn't just about that. What does it mean? Well, it means that I am going to do things that move creation in the direction God intends for it to go. I am improving creation. That's what work is. Which means sometimes it comes with paycheck, and sometimes it doesn't. That's a secondary issue. It's not about whether or not I'm earning a living doing this thing. Am I moving creation in the direction God intends for it to go? Which means everything that I do that moves creation toward what God intends it to be, that's good work. Some of you did a whole bunch of good work this morning already. Did you exercise and improve your physical condition? Did you parent? There's this endless list, and part of what I want you to hear is that we have this temptation. Part of why this whole organization exists is to get us past this point, but it's still deep in us to think that there's like works that God cares about, and that's the church stuff, and then there's what the rest of us are stuck doing. No, we're not telling the biblical story of work anymore when we talk about that. Work is improving creation, and I'll give you 5 buckets. If you think of a 6th one I missed, I want to hear about it, but here's my 5, all right? This is what I see God doing and inviting us to do to move creation in the direction he wants to do. Number 1, we make creation more orderly. God looks at this formless, void, blah of heaven and earth and is like, all right, let's put some water over here. Let's put some dry ground over here. Let's start organizing things by seasons and days and months. Let's put the kind of plants that can grow up here, and the kind of plants that grow over here. Let's put fish in the water. Let's put birds in the air. He starts organizing the whole thing. You've heard this one maybe, 1 Corinthians. There's some stuff going on in the Corinthian church that shouldn't be going on. And Paul says, God is not a God of chaos, but of order. God is in the business of bringing order out of chaos. And every time we bring order out of chaos, we are acting out the good work that he gave for us to do. I'm working on my kids. We're getting there. So when we make creation more orderly, that's good work. The second thing, productivity. When we make creation more productive, why do you think God started the whole human experience in a garden? A garden that doesn't produce in much of a garden. When you grow things, when you build things, when you plant things, when you harvest things, when you create artwork, you are producing something. You are bringing something into the world that wasn't there before. That's good work. So we make creation more orderly, more productive, more beautiful. Does God care about beauty? My friend Sean and I were talking this morning, last night. Sean's a bird watcher. You know the bird watchers here? Okay. Like, is God absurdly creative when it comes to making birds? What? It's crazy how many different kinds of birds and how people like, God is into beauty. Look at music, look at art, look at sculpting, look at poetry. God loves that. So when you make creation more beautiful, you are doing what God created you to do. Order, productivity, beauty, virtue. Does God intend for each of us to be conformed to Jesus, to exhibit the fruit of the Spirit, to become more loving, more patient, more kind, more gentle? These are things by which we become more like the God whose image we are supposed to become. God is into the, let's say, the increase in virtue, the productivity, order, beauty, virtue. The last one's fun. Here's what I mean by that. I'm saying work is improving creation. I come to anything that God has made and I think, how can I make this better? That's good work. But work is one of the things that God made us to do. The other is rest. And if work is coming to creation and saying this could get better, rest is coming to creation and saying this is already good. I'm going to make this better. I'm going to enjoy this just the way it is. But you all know that before there can be rest, before there can be enjoyment, it's got to be some work. Somebody had to build Silverwood. That's a lot of work. All right? So every time we have an opportunity to enjoy creation, to rest and to have fun in it, it's because work has happened already. And when you make something not enjoyable for somebody else, like cooking good food, or building snow stuff in the backyard for the kids to play in, or working at an amusement park, or being in sports, or being in entertainment, like these are all potential ways that we create opportunities for other people to enjoy God's creation, to have fun. That's good work. Order, productivity, beauty, virtue, fun. And I name all those, one, because I really want to make sure we understand that good work is much more than church work. And I'll bet you can think of what you spend most of your days doing, and it probably fits into one of those categories or a couple of those categories in different ways. But what I'm going to do every morning, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to look in the mirror and I'm going to say, you are not God. And then I'm going to look at my to-do list. And I'm going to ask myself, is the stuff on my list checking off these five categories, these 5 boxes? Are the things that I plan on spend my workday doing making creation more orderly, more productive, more beautiful, more virtuous, more fun? And if the answer is yes, that's good work. That is doing things that God has designed me to do. So part of taking the story, and out of the heart of that story, my mouth speaks to myself, you are not God, but God has given you good work to do. So here's the second bucket. This is the thing that I want to say to the person that I'm going away from. So in my case, this is going to be maybe my goal. And I'm going to say, Eliana, you're going to be here and I'm going to work over there. And so she's going to come to me and say, Daddy, do you have to go to work? Oh, this is such a pivotal discipleship moment right here. Here's what I want to say. I want to say, Evan, God has given me good work to do over there. And God has given you good work to do right here. This is not Daddy works and other people don't. Both of us work. I'm going to work there for a little while, and God has given that to me. And you're going to work here for a little while, and God's given that to you. And then this evening, we're going to come back, and we're going to join forces for a little while. So I'm not going to apologize. I know, I hate it, I'm sorry. Hey, at least we get summer vacation. No, I'm going to name what I'm going to do today as good work before God, and what she's going to do today as good work before God. Now, all of you who are married, you have kids in the home, like you understand how this is going to work. You know that there are various age-appropriate ways to have these conversations. But here's what's going to happen. And those of you that have older kids out of the house know how this goes. At some point, she's going to stop saying that. And there's 2 ways this could go. And the first way it can go is she just gets old enough that Dad is in the center of the world anymore. And all of a sudden, she's going to stop being bothered by the fact that I'm leaving. And I'm going to start being bothered by the fact that she's not bothered at the fact that I'm leaving. And I'm just like, wait, what happened to my sweet little girl who used to care about me? No, that's not how this needs to go. My dad used to say, probably still says, but said it to me, the purpose of having kids is to get them ready to leave. 18 years, give or take, with me, 65 years, give or take, without me. The purpose of having kids is to get them ready to leave. Part of the job is getting the next generation ready to do the job. Yeah. Which means right now, every time my daughter and I have a conversation about work, one of the things I am discipling her toward is preparing her to leave. And if all she ever gets from me is apologies and regrets every time I walk out of her room, I am teaching her something. Yeah. Now she's going to get older and get over it, but it's going to be a cliff. As opposed to saying, Ellie, let's talk about the work that you get to do today. And it is a good thing for you and for me that some of that work you and I do together, and some of it we don't. Because I know a few years from now, it's going to become a lot more work we don't do together, even if she's not ready for that. So these are the people I'm with. I'm not saying I'm sorry. I'm not teaching my children or my wife that work is a necessary evil and somebody's got to pay the bills for here. I am teaching her that God has given her good work to do and given me good work to do. And then we'll go from there. So there's things I say to myself, there's things I say to those from whom I go, and then there's some things I say to those to whom I come. Because now, in my case at least, I have walked in the garage, I got in my car, I've driven 15 minutes, and I've arrived at my office. So the conversations about work aren't done. This isn't just about what I say at home. This is about what I say right here. And the first thing that I'm going to say when I get there is I'm going to make sure everybody knows why. Why are we doing this? Now, how many of you have components of your work that you don't love? Come on, be honest. Any teachers? There's one thing you can ask any teacher on the planet. What's the part of your job that you'd be just as happy to live without? And there's one thing that every teacher will tell you, and it's called grading. No teacher ever loved grading. But what's this? Think about the difference between this is the part of the job that I don't love. This is the part of the job that I don't love, but I get why it needs to happen. It makes a difference, doesn't it? Makes all the difference in the world when I look at that stack of papers and think, oh. And you know how it is, right? Like you look at the stack of papers and you're like, I hope they're all awesome. Because if they're awesome, I just look at awesome. Oh, I'm going to be here a while. But I have to stop in a moment and say, why am I doing this? Is there an actual reason why this work is getting done for the improvement of creation? Because if there isn't one, we need to have that conversation. But if there is, and look, I don't want to be idealist about this. When you think about talking to your kids, so if your work is with kids, with your kids, just explaining why we're doing the dishes is not going to solve all your problems. All right? But you know that as we get older, as we become adults, it makes all the difference in the world. There's always going to be parts of my job I don't want to do. But if I know why we're doing them, it's helpful. So when I get to work, I'm going to talk to people like, wow, we're doing this. And second thing, there's a couple different ways to say this. My son and I were out in the garden the other day. And it's that time of year, all the weeds have grown up. By the way, this is part of being in that second phase. The weeds are the things that don't lead you to grow. They just do the wrong thing. All right, welcome to life under sin. So we're out there pulling weeds, and it's pain. And my son turns to me, he's like, Dad, this is a pain. And I say, yeah, work is like that sometimes. Now, there's a real big difference between if it was fun, they wouldn't call it work. And work is like that sometimes. Because work is like that sometimes. And so let's not lie about that. Work is a pain sometimes. Genesis 3 told us it was going to be a pain sometimes. So here's what I've got to say. I've got to say, make and mend are both good work. In fact, I'll say it stronger. Jordan Raynor, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Jordan Raynor, he's done some great stuff on theology of work. And he has a line, he says, in a world under sin, work will always have a bent toward renewal. And what he means by that is you're going to spend more time fixing stuff than building stuff. Because sin does that. And man, I don't like that. I want all the creative energy. I just wanted all the cruise. And like, no, that's not how it's going to be in this world, in this life. It's going to be a pain sometimes. And I got to name that. I got to tell my kids, yeah, this is not our favorite thing to do. I get that. It needs to be done. And not only does it need to be done, it is good, God-honoring work to do it. So I'm going to tell those people that I work with, we got good work to do here today. Some of it is not going to be our favorite. But first of all, here's why. We're doing it so you understand the reason. And secondly, just be aware, in a world broken by sin, mending stuff, fixing stuff. I come home and my wife has spent a good portion of her day cleaning up messes that we left behind when I took the kids to school. And then the kids get home before me, and she spends a good amount of her time breaking in fights, trying to get people to do homework that they don't want to do. In a world marked by sin, work will have a bent toward having to fix stuff. So we got to tell the whole bit of the story of work, because we got to acknowledge the fact that stuff is broken. Things fall apart. We have to fix it. But then there's that last bit of the story. I want my coworkers, whether they be my family members or other teachers at my school, wherever it may be, I want them to know that this is going somewhere. I want them to know that as painful and annoying as work sometimes is now, this is not the way it's always going to be. And so I come to them and I say something like, can you imagine what this task would be like without sin? So much of the work we do now, we are going to continue to do. There are some specific jobs that are just going to end, and that'll be good. We'll be happy about that. But a lot of our work continues on. Can you imagine what your works could be like when there's no more sin? And I want, for me, for my family, for my coworkers, to have this vision of this is where we're headed. We're not there yet. We're realists. But can you imagine how much fun work could be if you took sin out of the equation? Out of the heart, the mouth speaks. I want my heart to be in line with God's own heart for work. God sees the whole story. He knows where we are. He knows what's gone wrong, but he also knows where he's taking us. And I want my mouth to speak the words that are true about the way work originally was, the way it got messed up, the things that Jesus has done to start the redemptive process, and then in eternity in the new creation, the way it's always going to be. It's going to be awesome. I hope that is an encouragement to you. I hope you can look at the work that you do at home, in a cold site, at the road, in an office, in the classroom, wherever it is, and say, you know what, I'm living out my creative purpose as an image bearer by improving creation, by taking it in the direction that God decided it needed to go. And that, even on the worst days, that is good work.
Thanks for listening to the Extreme Stewardship Podcast. My name is Michael Kibbe, and I teach Bible and theology at Great Northern University in Spokane, Washington. My behind-the-scenes partner in this endeavor is Ben Kibbe, CEO of Kibbe Consulting in Columbiana, Ohio. Our editor-in-chief is Liam Olmsted. Art comes from Leah Leanhouse, and music is provided by Dave Murray of Daradoon Guitars. If this podcast has been useful or challenging to you, shoot us an email, extremestewards@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you think it might be useful or challenging to anyone else, well, you know what to do. Ultimately, we hope that listening to this podcast has helped you get better at making things good and good at making things better.